We're in late summer, early fall. This is a young, about a 4 or 5-year-old kit mango tree. Kit mangoes can be rather vigorous. Anyway, the fruit had been taken off this tree earlier. We were able to harvest the last fruit actually sometime in September, so this has been very nice. And that's typical for a dooryard tree. You can harvest the fruit slowly over a much longer time than people do commercially. But what I wanted to talk to you is, what should you be doing with your mango tree right now at this time of year? Several things. You can see these are the remnants. They're called rachis, and this is where the fruit was held on the tree. And you'll see it's located at the end of the branches where the fruit were. And these have died, and these will act as a source of disease infection for the flowers and the fruit in the spring. So in the home landscape, something that you can do, especially if you keep your trees small enough where you can reach them from the ground, is to remove these old rachises or parts of the panicle. And you can do that usually by just snapping it off. So you see here, and it's something that will reduce the amount of disease inoculum on your tree. So when it flowers and fruits, there's less of this around. So that's one thing that you can do at this time of year, and this will help to set your tree up for a more healthy flowering and fruiting next year. Another thing too is you can do some selective pruning to remove any dead branches that you see, to hopefully increase the amount of branching. I'll give you an example. Over here on this side of the tree, you have a shoot that's very long, very high. You can come in and you can remove this, take that last couple of feet off of this, and this will flower and branch down below here. So you're removing some of that over vigorous growth. Or another option would be to go ahead and selectively remove a few limbs. This limb is going just straight up into the sky, and you can cut this just above this little collar area, and that will reduce its upward growth, and you won't get any vigorous growth from this pruning cut here. You don't want to leave a stub because you will get vigorous bushy growth, which you don't want. That's undesirable. So there's a few things you can do with the pruning. Another thing you'll notice is there are a few, we've been very wet, and after and during the summer when we have very wet, humid weather, sometimes you get leaf diseases. And what you're seeing here, these red blotches here, this is an algae, and it's actually a parasitic algae. In other words, it feeds on the leaf. And this is easily controlled with a copper spray if it becomes a problem. The problem with the red algae is that it can cause the leaves to drop off prematurely. It's not something to get too excited about, especially since we're going into the dry season, and also if you keep the tree open to light and to air movement, it shouldn't become a big problem. There's a few other diseases here. Again, we've been so wet, hot and humid. There's some other leaf diseases here. These aren't anything to get too excited about right now, because as we enter the drier part of the year, these won't really be an issue. Another thing is you want to also enhance the chances that this tree is going to flower and fruit next year. So when we talk about fertilizer for your mango trees this time of year, again, I would not apply a nitrogen fertilizer, a nitrogen containing fertilizer. You want to use something that's high in potassium, something like a 0022, which is a ratio of fertilizer. As I mentioned, something high in potassium. And you can also apply micronutrients, manganese, zinc to the leaves, iron as a soil drench to the soil, but you want to avoid nitrogen applications. If you over-fertilize or if you use too much nitrogen and you really don't need to use it at this time of year, you may stimulate the tree to grow. You may also cause some problems with the fruit quality next spring and summer when you're harvesting the fruit. Water. A tree this age, well established, we're talking about a 4 or 5 year old tree, you really do not need to water this tree. especially during the winter months. So I would turn off the irrigation. The only time you really need to irrigate a well-established mango tree is when we have severe drought conditions. In other words, prolonged, we're talking months of drought. Mango trees really do, well-established, well-cared-for mango trees will tolerate a lot of dry conditions and actually do better with the drier conditions. So this time of year, you want to, as I mentioned, don't apply nitrogen fertilizer. You can apply all the other nutrients, both macronutrients like potassium and secondary elements like magnesium and minor elements like manganese and zinc and iron. You want to avoid the nitrogen, and you should also turn off the irrigation basically. So far as insects during the winter, the fall and winter, really should not be a problem. Occasionally there are some spider mites that may feed on the leaves. So you want to just come out and periodically take a look at your tree. If you get real high populations, you'll start to see a reddishness along the center of the leaf. In that case, you may want to try to control it, contact your local extension agent to ask what can be used. But in general, there really should not be any big insect or disease issues during the winter.